It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. And this is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And thanks for tuning in on WHP 580 AM and iHeartRadio. And also on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live and the various other Facebook's live programs we have running right now. If you'd like to watch prior podcasts of the show or read any of my columns on Penn Live or the Western Journal, or take a look at some great merchandise we have, you can take a look at our website at themarkscaringishow.com. And for more political and legal news throughout the course of the week, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And I apologize today. I have a little bit of a cold and a sore throat, so hopefully my throat can sustain and last through the duration of the program. And it's a little cold and windy and wet and snowy out there, so stay safe on those roads if you're traveling, or maybe you can hunker down in the house and enjoy maybe a good movie with the family. That's what we plan on doing later on today. Well, this week we've had some historic news. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has finally decided to send her much-beloved and, I would say, overindulged articles of impeachment from their comfy nook in the cozy confines of her House of Representatives to the harsh, cold reality of the United States Senate. There, like a baby lamb being led to its slaughter, the articles will meet a quick death. Though we've always known how the story will end, Pelosi still managed to inject some drama into it with her childish and feckless attempt to hold on to the ball until she got what she wanted. In a break with precedent, Pelosi stunned the nation by refusing to immediately transmit the articles to the Senate after they were approved in the House. Her purported reason? Well, she wanted to know what the rules in the Senate would be, what rules the Senate would adopt, so that she could decide which House managers to appoint before transmitting the articles to the Senate. That wasn't quite true. The real reason is she thought she could pressure Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell into agreeing to call certain witnesses that the Democrats wanted, including White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney and former National Security Advisor John Bolton, and to produce certain documents that have recently surfaced that Democrats thought would bolster their case. That was Pelosi's real reason for the delay in transmitting the articles. But Pelosi's pressure campaign was doomed to fail. Oddly, she thought she could get something from McConnell by withholding from him something he didn't want, the impeachment articles. It's a very strange negotiating tactic. Where did Pelosi learn how to negotiate? She obviously hasn't read The Art of the Deal. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, well, he called her bluff. He said there will be no haggling with the House over Senate procedure and declared he would convene the trial without agreeing to call Democrats' requested witnesses. Then, in a brilliant maneuver, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri introduced a resolution to amend Senate rules to allow a motion to dismiss articles of impeachment for lack of prosecution because Pelosi still had not transmitted them. He said, if Speaker Pelosi is afraid to try her case, the articles should be dismissed for failure to prosecute, and Congress should get back to work doing the people's business. That was Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. Mitch McConnell signed on to Hawley's resolution, putting a real scare in Pelosi because Pelosi was trapped. Confronted with the embarrassment of having the articles dismissed because of her failure to prosecute her case, Pelosi, she did an about-face, and she declared she's going to send the articles over, and she'll send them soon, even though she didn't get what she wanted from McConnell. Game over. Pelosi folded like a cheap pantsuit. Perhaps she should brush up on her gambling skills by listening to some old Kenny Rogers songs. Contrary to what some of her acolytes in the House say, she clearly didn't know when to hold them or fold them. In fact, she shouldn't have been sitting at the table in the first place. She has zero constitutional authority to try to dictate terms to the United States Senate. Pelosi, the self-declared master legislator and strategic, politically astute leader of the House of Representatives, proved herself to be more like the fool on the hill instead of the master of the hill. The real gambler, Kenny Rogers that is, who supports the president, by the way, would not be impressed. Fresh from her bloodbath at the poker table, Pelosi got desperate. She charged the Senate Republicans that if they refused to call her requested witnesses, they'd be engaging in a cover-up. So now you have the Speaker of the House that impeached the president and is soon to be, at that time, appointing managers to conduct the trial in the Senate. She's now attacking the judge and jurors of her case. Not a very wise move, Nancy. Yet Pelosi had the opportunity, but chose not to compel those same witnesses, Bolton, Mulvaney, and others, to testify at her impeachment hearings in the Senate. She claimed, well, it would take too long in the courts and that in the meantime, Trump would steal the 2020 election. Well, she didn't really explain or elaborate how Trump would steal the 2020 election, but nevertheless, that was her justification, as absurd and as ridiculous as it was. To Pelosi, her refusal to call certain witnesses in the House is a patriotic act to save the republic and protect the integrity of our elections because President Trump is going to somehow collude with the Ukrainians this time to throw the election in his favor. But really, Senate Republicans' refusal to call those same witnesses, Nancy Pelosi says, well, that's a cover-up. None of Pelosi's justifications come anywhere close to being credible. But that doesn't really matter. Pelosi knows she's lost the impeachment charade. That's why she's reduced herself to making the taunts that sore losers make. Pelosi recently bragged, this president is impeached for life, regardless of any gamesmanship on the part of Mitch McConnell. Well, true, Trump has been impeached, but it will remain with him for the rest of his life. But what's also likely to be true is that President Trump will be acquitted in the Senate, and that will exonerate and vindicate him in the eyes of the American people. And when Trump wins re-election and wins decisively, Pelosi's impeachment will go down as one of the worst political defeats in U.S. history. That defeat will be laid at the feet of Nancy Pelosi, who stupidly bet the House on a poor hand and lost in her biggest gamble as Speaker of the House. This failed impeachment may very well cost Democrats the House of Representatives and Pelosi her speakership, and that stigma will last for the rest of Nancy Pelosi's life. Well, there's my opening statement on today's Mark Scaringi Show. We're going to take a brief commercial break. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Now, more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. I just delivered my opening statement on why I believe Nancy Pelosi is a failed gambler. She's no Kenny Rogers, and her big gamble to withhold the impeachment articles in an attempt to coerce or put a pressure campaign on Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to compel him to agree to call Democrats' requested witnesses, well, that failed. So this is a great big failure for Nancy Pelosi. But she has taken to the nightly television shows, and she's been taunting President Trump, saying that he has been impeached for life. So she's playing the sore loser, and she's trying to rub it in to this president, and he has not been reacting very kindly to that, and of course will not. But I'm interested to learn what my viewers think about Nancy Pelosi's gamble. Did it work? Was it a failure? And your thoughts on the upcoming Senate impeachment trial. You're welcome to call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580, or you can comment on one of the various Facebook Live programs we have going, including Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. Now, how about that House procession and Nancy Pelosi's signing ceremony? I wonder if any of my listeners watched that, if they tuned into that. Right after the House approved the managers and approved the resolution to transmit the articles to the Senate, Nancy Pelosi, well, she gathered around her House managers that she had appointed. They stood around her as she sat on that wood-paneled desk, and she signed the articles of impeachment with those specially designed faux gold-paneled pens. I don't know if you looked at that or if you tuned in. She used a different pen to write, to sign not just she wasn't signing multiple copies of the articles of impeachment to give one House manager a separate copy. No, she only had 2 articles of impeachment. And so she was reduced to signing one letter of her name at a time, each with an individual separate pen that she would then later on hand to the various House managers and those who were gathered around her. So this signing did take a while as Nancy Pelosi kind of scratched out her name one letter at a time. NBC News was, of course, all the news networks were giving live coverage to the signing ceremony. NBC News announced each of those pens is a piece of history. Well, there have been a lot of rumors around the internet as to the cost of those pens. Some posts I've seen have them in the thousands of dollars. I'm not so sure about that. Pelosi's deputy chief of staff was asked about the cost and stated the pens she used to sign the articles, well, they cost just under $15 a piece. But at $15 a piece with the total number of pens, that was about $450 of your taxpayer dollars that Nancy Pelosi used to sign these articles of impeachment. Now, how many of you, when you're about to sign a contract or a deed or a sales agreement, how many of you go out and buy $450 worth of pens before you sign an important legal document? Well, you don't, because you're spending your own money. Nancy Pelosi, she does. She's spending your own money, not hers. And Nancy Pelosi, with a glint in her eye and a big smile on her face, she handed out the pens as souvenirs to the House managers and those standing around. You know, they giggled and they laughed, even though, remember, this was supposed to be a very somber event. Now, Pelosi appointed 7 members of Congress as impeachment managers, with the House Intelligence Committee Chairman, Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, as the lead manager. Then our Democratic House managers, they went on that march. If you haven't seen that, you've got to go on YouTube or Google and watch the march. The House impeachment managers actually lined up in 2 rows behind the House clerk and the sergeant of arms, and they marched in a slow, somber way, almost like a funeral procession. They marched across the Capitol, through the Statuary Hall, through the Rotunda, and then over to the House side. NBC News announced, "It is a moment of solemnity. You can see their grim faces as they walk." Now, before they started to walk, they were laughing and giggling as Nancy was handing out the pens. But now, it's very solemn. They have very grave, grim looks as they walk across the Capitol Rotunda to deliver those articles of impeachment, as if the weight of history was in every step that they took. Now, meanwhile, most of these House managers have been calling for the president's impeachment for years now, and prior to the call between the president and the Ukrainian President Zelensky. But nevertheless, that's what we have. And the photographers were all there. You could hear their cameras shuttering that cascading sound of all the cameras going off. The television crews were there. The lights, the Klieg lights were up. It was a made-for-TV moment. In fact, it was a made-for-TV moment. It was entirely orchestrated. It was a theatrical production. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. I want to take some calls first. You're welcome to call in 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580, or you can comment on our Facebook Live. And let's take a call. James from Mechanicsburg. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show. Did Nancy Pelosi do a good job? Was she a good gambler or a failed gambler?
Mark, I think she's absolutely a failed gambler, 100%. And, I'm pretty concerned about what it's going to do, at local elected officials, what our locals are going to do, and how that's going to have, really impact 2020. I hear that there's potentially a never Trumper running for AG on the Republican side. I think her name's Heather. She's like, I wanted to know what your thoughts were on her, and if we should really, be taking a gamble like that.
That's an interesting question, James from Mechanicsburg. It looks like the sole Republican candidate for Attorney General of Pennsylvania is Heather Heidelbaugh, an attorney out of Pittsburgh. And I have posted on Facebook my own concerns about some tweets that Ms. Heidelbaugh made several months ago, lauding Jim Comey, the former FBI director, John Brennan, the former CIA director, and also a Michael Gearson article which really blasted President Trump and used some terrible descriptions and names to describe him and his presidency. But my biggest concern is saying laudatory things, very positive things about the work of John Brennan and James Comey. Those two men, in my view, in my opinion, abused our national security laws, our criminal justice system, our criminal laws, abused our FISA court, really in a conspiracy, colluding in an attempt to frame this man, Donald Trump, for a non-existent crime that he didn't commit. And so I have serious concerns about any attorney, let alone a candidate for attorney general, who expresses admiration for the work of James Comey and John Brennan. I don't know how any attorney could have anything positive to say about the manner in which those two men conducted themselves and used the awesome power of their offices against an innocent man. It should send chills down the spine of every Pennsylvanian and every American. So those are my thoughts. James from Mechanicsburg, thanks for calling. Appreciate your call. We have Jeff from Mechanicsburg. Boy, lots of listeners in Mechanicsburg. Jeff, your thoughts on the Pelosi gamble and the upcoming Senate impeachment trial?
Well, I believe that Nancy Pelosi succeeded in what she was trying to do, and when she says that Trump's going to be impeached for life, she's right. She's ingrained in our social media. I mean, it can't be erased from the archive that we all use. And whenever anybody searches in the future about Donald Trump, they're going to look into our social media platforms, and they're not going to have anything but what Nancy Pelosi intended to do to begin with.
I have an interesting response to that. Now, I will say I'm not so sure she achieved what she wanted. Remember, what she wanted was a commitment from Mitch McConnell that he would call the Democrats' requested witnesses, Mick Mulvaney, John Bolton, and the others, and he didn't agree to that. So the main reason why she held off on transmitting those impeachment articles, that was a failure.
Delay.
What's that?
It was a delay.
Yeah, a delay.
It was a delay tactic. I mean, that's the whole program for the Democrats is to ignore the court and to cause delay.
That's right.
So as long as they cause delay, then everything works out for them.
That's right.
Just like the Mueller report wasn't released for 18 months, it's just a big delay program. Just like Amerithrax, it was a 2-year propaganda to maintain hysteria for 2 years. okay, about what happened in Trenton, New Jersey.
Hey,
Okay?
here's
And it was done by the same man. It's done by the same man.
here's
So
my
be
here's
cautious.
what I think, Jeff, is I think it's an interesting take. Maybe the listeners won't. Nancy Pelosi constantly says that Trump is impeached for life. He's impeached forever. It's a stain that will never go away. My response to that is he is now going to go to trial, I believe, on Tuesday in the Senate. And the senators will vote to either convict or acquit. It's not a criminal court. It's not a court at all. But those are criminal terms, conviction and acquittal. You don't find those terms in a civil court. And in criminal court in Pennsylvania, and probably in states across the country, if you are a defendant and you go to trial, and if you are acquitted, you have an automatic right to an expungement of your criminal record, of that record of the arrest, the indictment, and everything that came as a result of that. A judge must, on your request, expunge all of that, remove the stain from your reputation. So what I think is my little interesting legal analysis here, and my advice to Alan Dershowitz and Cipollone and the other attorneys who have a little bit more experience and knowledge and success than I've had, my advice, since the Senate can create its own rules by majority, is to add that rule that if the Senate acquits the president, he has the right to an expungement of that impeachment vote in the House, thus removing the stain from his reputation for life. We've got to take a quick commercial break. You're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show. Stay tuned.
Mark?
Let's get back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And thank you for bearing with my cold and my scratchy throat. I've been able to accomplish half of the radio show. We'll see about the other half. And I think that was Van Halen's Jump from 1984. Is that right, JC? I think I was about 14 years old when that song came out and was a hit record. And we're talking about Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's great gamble to withhold those articles of impeachment, to try to get concessions from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. She touts herself as a master legislator and tactician, political tactician. In my view, a great big failure, a failed gambler. She's a bad gambler and a bad poker player because she didn't get what she set out to do. And how about perhaps Nancy should kind of brush up, maybe read The Art of the Deal, and brush up on her negotiating skills. Just consider this for 1 minute. Nancy Pelosi was withholding the articles of impeachment from the Republican-controlled Senate that did not want them. They did not want her to deliver the articles of impeachment. They do not want to impeach the president. So that's Nancy's idea. I'm going to withhold these articles from you until you commit to calling the witnesses we want to commit. But the Senate didn't want the articles of impeachment. What a ridiculous negotiating tactic. Good Lord. She's no gambler at all. And as I said, the real gambler, Kenny Rogers, would probably disavow her as a gambler. And then we were talking about how she spent $450 of your taxpayer dollars to get these beautiful pens, and she signed the articles of impeachment one letter at a time and handed out these pens to the House managers. And then they went on that funeral procession, really, which is what it was, from the House to the Senate to deliver the articles to the Senate. It was all kabuki theater, really. It was all high ceremony. They were very grave and very solemn. And then she goes on, Bill Maher, of the talk show last night, and giggles and laughs and talks about how Trump is impeached forever. Trump is impeached for life. It's a stain that will never be removed. And then I was giving my legal advice to the Trump legal team. They've got some pretty sharp lawyers there, Jay Sekulow, Pat Cipollone. They've got Alan Dershowitz, Pam Bondi, and others. And perhaps my legal career has not risen quite to their heights. But, hey, my advice is this. The Senate has its rules on impeachment. The Constitution says very little about almost nothing, actually nothing, next to nothing about how the Senate must conduct the trial. But the Constitution uses the word acquit. That's a criminal term. Convict, which is a criminal term, and the opposite of convict is acquit. So my argument is it's somewhat of a quasi-criminal proceeding. And in criminal law, if you're a defendant and you're charged with theft, and there's a criminal complaint and it spells out the charges, there's an affidavit of probable cause that has all of this stuff about how bad you are and how you committed this theft, and that goes through the criminal justice system. It becomes what's called an information, or in the federal level, an indictment, and then these are all public records, and then you go to trial. You have a trial before a judge or a jury, and at the end of the trial, you are acquitted. Do you know what right you have in Pennsylvania, and I'm sure states across the country? You have the right to an expungement of that entire record from the very start. The expungement goes all the way back to the very first legal paperwork, the criminal complaint that was filed against you. So my free legal advice to the Trump legal team is this. Make a rule. You need a majority vote to make a procedural rule in the Senate and create a new rule. And the rule is this. If the president is acquitted of the articles of impeachment, he has an automatic right to an expungement of the entire record. And you've got the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presiding. The Chief Justice can so order. Let it be done, right? The Chief Justice can issue an order of expungement, and then the entire record has to be removed, and the stain is lifted. So President Trump is not impeached for life, as Nancy Pelosi claims he is. Anyway, enough about that. That's my interesting, somewhat maybe silly legal argument, but you never know. Maybe someone will pick up with that and run with that, and we'll get some credit for it. JC, what do you think? We've got lots of callers in the phone bank, so I want to start taking some more calls. I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on Nancy Pelosi's big gamble and how you think the president's going to do in his upcoming Senate impeachment trial, which I believe is to convene on Tuesday, just a few days from today. Let's talk to John. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Hello, Mark and JC. Accolades to you, too, for a great show.
Oh, thank you.
Mark, you're the legal mind here, so I need this question answered.
Oh, boy, I'm getting a little nervous.
I need someone to show proof of the statute and or rules of the Senate that allowed Pelosi to do this in the Senate. Those articles, in my opinion, should have been signed before they went over so that she could not have this political charade. Now, if no statute or rules exist, then I'm going to challenge Senator Toomey and all Republican senators to charge House Member Pelosi to be impeached for the high crimes and misdemeanors of squandering taxpayer funds. Your comment, please.
Of obstructing the Senate trial, perhaps.
Whatever.
Well, there's a lot in there, John. There's no statute. There's no common law here on impeachment. The Constitution only has a few phrases, a few sentences describing the power of impeachment in the House and in the Senate. So there's not a whole...
No, that's not my question. My question is, what allowance is that for her to do what she did in the Senate? The signing should have been done in the House. She should not have been allowed to make this a political charade.
Oh, I see. The signing of the articles of impeachment.
Yeah, that should have been done in the House.
Well, that occurred in the House. I mean, that occurred on outside of her office on the House side.
Well, then why was she allowed to do this charade on the floor? This just adds to the idiotic nature of Nancy Pelosi and Schiff and Nadler and what they've been doing and screwing up this whole thing for our country.
True enough, John.
I am not happy.
Well, neither am I, and neither is half of America. And John, thanks for calling. I appreciate that. An interesting point is raised from John's comments, and that is Nancy Pelosi withholding those articles of impeachment for nearly a month. Was she obstructing Congress? Was she obstructing the Senate in particular? Because the Constitution gives the Senate the sole power to conduct the impeachment trial. But that's another interesting argument that probably will never be resolved. And let's talk to some more of our callers. We have John from Colonial Park. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Yeah, Mark, I got two simple questions.
Yes.
One, while Nancy was doing this, do you think that Donald John Trump is an honest man?
Yes.
That okay, you do. So then why, on the very night that he was impeached by the Congress, did he stand on TV and say that the bombings that occurred had no injuries and then 3 days later we find out that 11 of our soldier guys are injured?
Well, it was
why would we allow that to happen?
I think what occurred was they were examined to determine whether or not there were any concussive results from the bomb explosion, and then 11 of them received some sort of medical treatment for that. So,
well, the president said, anybody wounded? No. Anybody killed? No. They were wounded. They were injured.
Well, I'm not so sure it was a wound or an injury, and
so technical. Well, I know this. If it was a regular trial where there was a judge and a jury, and it's sad because locally here we've got a lot of stuff going on, and nobody's paying attention to what is actually on the books. That's what I'm getting at. Nobody is actually looking at what is on the books that is actual law.
All right.
You know what I'm saying?
I know what
you're saying, Mark?
I know what you're saying, John. I know what you're saying. Thanks for calling. Appreciate having the benefit of your views. We've got time for one more quick question before our next commercial break. Mary from New Cumberland, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show. Go ahead, Mary.
Hello.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
I'm okay, Mark. How you doing?
I'm great. Do you have a suggestion for Nancy Pelosi?
I do, kind of. You know, she went through this whole process prayerfully.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if she's going to, be fortunate enough to maintain her speakership.
Let's hope not.
That would be sad. Yeah, that would be sad for her.
We'll pray on that.
She might have some time on her hands.
Hopefully.
And so, yeah, I have a suggestion.
All right, let's hear it.
So prayerfully, she might, pick up the Bible. There are scriptures that talk about how it is God who raises up kings and puts them down. And she is fighting with God in her position as a speaker. She has already taken on more power in the natural realm. I don't know if she understands that she's been tangling with the spiritual realm, and she should not try to take on God. And I think that she needs to prayerfully consider the Bible.
And I'm sure she won't. Mary from New Cumberland, thanks for calling. I think that was a very interesting, fascinating perspective. Nancy Pelosi is the slayer of kings here. She's going to try to take down the President of the United States on a specious, fabricated, trumped-up charge that is not a crime. The President did nothing wrong. And we shall see what the response is from the American people. And I think that Nancy Pelosi has inadvertently awakened the spirit of the American people, and they're not going to tolerate this charade. More about the Senate impeachment trial when we return from this brief commercial break.
Now, more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking today about Nancy Pelosi's big gamble and how it failed, and the upcoming Senate impeachment trial of the President of the United States. This is the last segment of the show, so you better hurry up and call in if you want to get a call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. Or you can comment live on Harrisburg 100 Facebook or the various other Facebook pages we have. We have a very interesting comment from Mindy Fessler, and she writes, "How is it not a conflict of interest for a senator who is an opponent in the race for the President of the United States to serve as a juror in the impeachment trial?" That is an outstanding question. That is an excellent question. It's something I've been raising for a couple of months now without answer. well, without answer from our friends on the left and the liberal media and the Democratic candidates themselves. But let me tell you, if I were on the Trump legal team, or if I were a United States Senator, If I were a United States Senator, I'd put a motion on the floor to strike jurors, to strike Bernie Sanders, to strike Elizabeth Warren, to strike Amy Klobuchar, 3 United States senators who are running for the presidency of the United States. They're trying to defeat Donald Trump in office. They want to replace the incumbent president. Yet they are going to vote. They are going to vote on whether this president should be convicted and removed from office. Well, let me tell you, if they vote to convict and remove, and if they have 2/3 majority vote, which they're not, but if they did, wouldn't that make their jobs a little easier in the upcoming campaign? I think so. We'd have Mike Pence elevated to the presidency as a result of the removal. And now the Democratic candidates are not going up against the incumbent president of the United States in the name of Donald J. Trump, who is a political powerhouse. They're going up against the vice president, who's been recently elevated, and it's a very, very different political scenario for the Democrats. So absolutely. When we lawyers are picking jurors in a criminal or even a civil trial, we have strikes. We have peremptory strikes and discretionary strikes where we can ask a judge to strike a juror if we believe that juror is biased and cannot render a fair and impartial verdict. We can move to strike that juror. So if I am one of Trump's lawyers, I think I'm going to stand up in the well of the Senate with a couple of motions to strike. I'm going to strike three United States senators and try to remove them from the jury. They have everything to win in their own personal political lives by voting to convict and remove the President of the United States. Yet I am shocked that this is not a bigger issue that is being debated in Congress, in the Senate today, or in the media. I'm surprised that no senators have stood up to raise this issue at all, let alone in a very forceful and impactful way. I was pleasantly surprised, by United States Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, who came up with the idea that I've been talking about on this show and in my columns for months now, and that is, how about a motion to dismiss? If Nancy Pelosi is not going to transmit those articles of impeachment over the United States Senate, in court, we call that non-pros, where the prosecutor or the plaintiff, if it's a civil case, if they are failing to move their case forward, you file a motion to have it stricken, to throw the case out. And that's what Josh Hawley did, and that really got Nancy Pelosi's attention because Mitch McConnell signed on to it, and that's what ultimately made Nancy Pelosi transmit those articles over, because she was very afraid that the Senate would pass that rule, that motion, that resolution by Josh Hawley by majority vote, and then they would vote to dismiss those 2 articles of impeachment because Nancy didn't bother to send them over. But anyway, so we have some senators who have come up with some creative resolutions, creative motions in the United States Senate to defend this president of the United States. And I'd like to see some more creative lawyering going on. As I say, they've got. I'll give them my idea to create a new rule that if the president is acquitted of these charges, then he has the right to an automatic expungement of the entire record. Remove it as if it never occurred, thus removing the stain. Thus, there's no impeachment for life. So that's just a little bit of my legal advice. My other legal advice is to get a senator up there on the floor to put in a resolution or a bill, and that is to allow the defendant, to the accused, in this case Donald Trump, to give him challenges, peremptory, discretionary challenges, to move to strike very biased jurors, U.S. senators, who have a very personal stake in the outcome of this Senate trial. Will that happen? Probably 100% not. But anyway, I think it's a very if I were down there, I would try it. Let's hear from some more of our callers. We have Alec from Wormsley's. Wait a second. Wormsleysburg. My goodness.
Wormsleysburg, man.
And I live in Camp Hill, and I just couldn't get that. I've got so much drugs and medication and lozenges in me to kind of keep me alive because I've got this cold. But, Alec, tell me what your thoughts are on Nancy Pelosi's big gamble.
Well, first thing, Counselor, you're barking up a maple tree when you should be going up an oak tree. When it comes to these people that are running for president, okay, they should not be there because they're impeaching Trump because he tried to take Biden out of the whole scene. But here these people are going to take Trump out of the election. Yeah. Now, can you equate to that? There's the angle that they should be going on.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Very good. Thank you.
And
yes.
Pelosi and her little cronies think they're jealous of Trump, okay, because they think this is The Apprentice. Okay, they did this big stage and all this stuff, and everybody can see the hypocrisy. Oh, it's so horrible, it's so horrible, and then they're laughing and giggling with the pens, like you said.
Yeah,
it's just people are seeing this, and I hope people can wake up and see the obnoxiousness and the anti-American hating people that are there. Trump is trying to help us, the American people, all the American people, and these people, all they do is obstruct. I mean, they're not even doing their jobs.
Well, Alec, we've been joking about it on the show a little bit today, but you are so right, and that is Nancy Pelosi giggling and laughing and handing out the pens and that ridiculous funeral procession. It's all staged, and I think the American people see through that.
She thinks she's president right now,
and
if she can get rid of Trump, and they've also, I heard on Midnight Trucker Radio, they're trying to get some stuff on Pence. If she can get rid of both of them, she's
president of the United States. Yeah, that's right. That's a very good point.
She's giggling and laughing like she is pres.
And as Mary Collar pointed out, that Nancy's always talking about how prayerful she is and how she's praying for the president. No one believes that.
On her part.
No one believes that. That is such a fraud. Yet she continues to say it, and she's really starting to grate on, I think, maybe half of the American people, maybe even more, because this really is a serious thing what they're doing. They are
it's ridiculous.
They are trying to remove. They're trying to remove a duly elected president of the United States on trumped-up charges that aren't even real. So
I live in the area, and I drive around, and we go to retirement breakfasts, and everybody's got Trump hats and shirts on. People love Trump. Go to one of his rallies. And then look at these people running for president that want to give everything for free, okay? And there's 50 or 100 people there. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, well said. Alec, I've got to take a bunch of other calls here. Thanks for calling. Appreciate your views. We have Brian from Mechanicsburg. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Hi, Mark. I just have one funny thing and then one serious thing.
Let's hear them.
Nancy Pelosi praying for us, or praying for the president. We need to pray for Nancy Pelosi like the rabbi prayed for the czar in Fiddler on the Roof. That God bless her and keep her as far away from us as possible.
Very good. That's my favorite musical, by the way, Fiddler on the Roof. But go ahead.
The serious thing. I heard that she took the money to pay for all the impeachment stuff out of Social Security.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I haven't looked into that.
I'm not sure either, but somebody was quoting me a particular thing that she passed so that the millions and millions of dollars this cost came out of Social Security because, after all, the older folks are the ones that put Trump in office.
Ah, interesting point. I don't know. I'll look into that, Brian, I promise. And thanks for the call. I've got to get to a few more callers here before the end of the show. We have Warren from York. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, Warren. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Are you warm down there in York?
Pardon me?
Are you staying warm down there in York?
It's cold and icy here, but hey, we'll get over it.
Very good.
It'll be warm next week, and everybody will be good.
What's on your mind?
Hey, a guy earlier called and referred to Nancy Pelosi as a failed gambler.
Yeah.
He was being quite generous, I think. It'd be like if I know nothing about blackjack, but I thought I'll go to Vegas, and because I'm smart, I'll just win at blackjack, even though I don't have any skill. And I don't have a problem with her being a stupid gambler, but she third and lied to the presidency. That's the part that scares me.
And she's gambling with our republic, and she's gambling with our election results. The people, the American people, put Donald Trump into office, and she's treating it as a farce, and she's trying to take him out of office on trumped-up charges, and I think that's a disgrace. Warren, thanks for calling. I appreciate that. We only have about a minute left, or less, JC is saying. Well, we've seen it all here over the past week. The president has been impeached. Nancy Pelosi did her signing ceremony. We had the Democrat House managers on their funeral procession from the House to the Senate. The Senate has taken up the articles. Mitch McConnell has scheduled trial for Tuesday. It will be quite an historic event next week, so I'm sure you'll all tune in. And tune in to the Mark Scaringi Show next week, same time, same place.